In most everyday actions, the functions of the abdominal muscles neither is nor expressed in the movement aspect. The abdominal muscles in the movement aspect. Except for actions as standing up from a low crotch or a backwards tilted chair. Everyday action in which the abdominal muscles function in movement. In contradistinction, in the stabilizing aspect, the abdominal muscles are expressed in most of the actions that require balance and stability. In order to activate the abdominal muscles in the stabilizing aspect, conditions must be created that will enable their contraction while maintaining a neutral pelvic position. Neutral pelvis. Posterior pelvic tilt. The lower back is pressed to the floor. Anterior pelvic tilt. An arch is created between the lower back and the floor. When activating the abdominal muscles in the stabilizing aspect, we will maintain a neutral pelvis. Exercise 1. Passive flexion of the thigh, heel slide. Heel slide on the floor. The greater the hip flexion, the more the pelvis will tend to posterior pelvis tilt, PPT. The greater the hip extension, the more the pelvis will tend to anterior pelvis tilt. Leg weight draws the pelvis forward. The abdominal muscles will act as stabilizers to prevent this tilt. Exercise 2. Active hip flexion. Hip flexors have two main movements: hip flexion and anterior pelvic tilt, APT. The main hip flexors, iliopsoas, rectus femoris. Their actions, hip flexion, and pelvic tilt. When the hip flexors work, they try to create the two movements. What determines which movement will occur is which side is stabilized. The abdominals are supposed to stabilize the pelvis and prevent anterior tilt. The abdominal as stabilizers, especially the transverse and oblique abdominals. Another variation of active hip flexion. The load on the abdominals as pelvic stabilizers is very high. Exercise 3. Plank. According to the ceiling principle, supporting the body hanging between two posts requires support bands at its lower part. According to this principle, exercises to strengthen the abdominal muscles can be performed in which the exerciser is supported by his hands and legs with the trunk in the air and facing the floor. In these positions, the abdominals must work to maintain the pelvic and chest position, preventing anterior pelvic tilt, preventing the chest from escaping. Example for training the abdominal muscles in their stabilizing function. In most everyday actions, the